USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Spotlight, a weekly podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online at USCHO.com, featuring conversations with college hockey coaches and players and journalists who cover the sport.
Welcome to USCHO Spotlight for Wednesday, September 29th, 2021. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. Jim, it's a brand new season and it has been an active offseason. There's a lot to catch up on in this episode.
After a year that felt like it wasn't a year, no fans in buildings until really in the postseason, which still, you and I were part of the Frozen Four in Pittsburgh, and I know it was a great time for UMass and the four teams involved, but it still never felt like a Frozen Four. It never felt like a regional. It never felt like a conference tournament. Nothing felt right about last season. So I know there's still problems in the world that go along with COVID, but at the same time, I think we're going to see fans in buildings this year. I think we're going to be seeing things almost look like normal, but they still won't. And I'm okay with almost looking like normal at this point compared to what we had last year.
Well, before we dive into all that stuff we've got on the rundown, we should preview our guests for our second segment of the show today.
Yeah, certainly. A new partnership for USCHO, a media partner, the College Hockey Inc. Virtual Coaches Clinic. That will take place October 4th through 8th. We'll be talking in the second half of the show with Aaron Wilbur, who runs the coaches site, does a great job. That's been a company that's been up and running for some time. And they partnered this year with Mike Snee in College Hockey Inc. And everybody knows that College Hockey Inc. does a fantastic job promoting college hockey. So the two powers together, wow, what an event that will be October 4th through 8th. So there'll be more information in the second half of the show, how to sign up for that, become part of that. It will be a great 5 days of learning and knowledge that come from some of the best coaches in college hockey.
Well, why don't we jump in right where we always seem to jump in, and that's with the USCHO.com Division I men's ice hockey poll. The preseason poll was out on Monday. No surprise, was number one. It was interesting, though, to see 8 teams getting votes for number one in the country, but let's just jump in. What are your thoughts on that? Massachusetts, 19 votes out of the 50, and they're in first place in the poll. They were last year's national champion, after all.
In recent years, it has seemed very traditional for voters to just go and vote the number one team as the one that won the national championship. And when you really think about that in the grander scheme, I get it. But, if you paid attention to this offseason, I don't want to knock UMass. I think they're going to be a really strong team again this year. And Greg Carvel knows how to build. He knows how to reload. But they lost some assets. They lost a lot of their team. They lost big pieces of their national championship team. And there are some other really strong teams. St. Cloud State obviously made the national title game. I would expect them right up there. And voters recognize that. They were number 2. But I think, I know that the team that got my vote, and they're the third team in our poll, was Michigan. The reality is, I might have lost count, 7 or 8 first-round draft picks over the last 2 seasons in their lineup this year. I mean, that is going to be a team with so much talent.
They are going to have a lot of talent, and it's going to be up to head coach Mel Pearson to be like Joe Torre was 15 seasons ago with the New York Yankees, where he has to manage a lot of great talent and help them meld into a team.
I do think that's one of the biggest jobs that a head coach has to do year in, year out. And we've talked about this on this exact podcast many times before. If you recruit the best, you're recruiting players that are used to being the best player on their team. If all these guys are first round draft picks, you realize that somebody has to play the second line. Somebody has to play the third line probably in this. You've got some great defensemen. Somebody might not be on the top D pair. And at the same time, and we talk about this all the time, college hockey on average has gotten older over the years. They have not gotten younger. This is not a league of a bunch of 17 and 18-year-olds. And that is what Michigan is right now in terms of their top talent. They're 18 and 19-year-old players. Will they play against 22, 23-year-old, 24-year-old players that can bump them around a little bit more? There's some more strength, there's some more size, there's more maturity. We say this every year. Does that impact things? And we've looked at some of the other teams, and I know we're going to get into transfers and stuff like that, but we'll get into how that impacts things. Some teams want to get older. Some of the best teams in the country want to get older. Michigan, as it is right now, great team. I mean, they were an easy number one pick on my ballot, but at the same time, they're very young.
And you say 23, 24, there are going to be some 25-year-olds, or maybe almost 26 when the season ends because of fifth-year players getting an extra year of eligibility. So you take somebody who's just turned 18 against somebody who's 25. There's a heck of a lot of physical development and maturity in there between the 25-year-old and the 18-year-old, who probably in a lot of cases still needs to, put on 20 pounds?
And I agree with that. I think the one benefit for Michigan is they're in the Big Ten, and I feel like the Big Ten schools in general do stick with getting some of the younger freshmen. There are some teams, I think, I look at Michigan State, even Penn State as being able to recruit some of the older players in that league. Notre Dame, I think, Jeff Jackson has kind of even gone that route as much as he can. But in comparison to leagues, like if they were in the CCHA right now, the old WCHA, you'd be by far the young. I mean, they're probably going to be one of the youngest teams in the country anyways, but you'd be by far the youngest team in the the CCHA. I will screw that up at least 20 times in this podcast this year. I got it right the first time, but the reality is that there will be teams, and those are the teams that you're going to be taxed at beating in the first round of an NCAA tournament. When, it's one game and you've got to find a way to get past a bunch of older guys that you don't care about what your name is, who you are, where you were drafted, and the fact that you're 19 years old or 18 years old. So I love Mel Pearson and what he does there. I think that he has put together an unbelievable team, but that is probably the biggest challenge ahead of him. He'll probably tell you that if you ask him. He's a pretty honest guy. You've got to find a way to make these players play together, play well, and play above their age.
Another thing that's interesting in the poll, North Dakota number 8 in the poll, but with 2 first place votes, and Denver number 13 with 1 first place vote. And what that may be indicative of is something I've heard from coaches, and that's they know less going into this year about their opponents than maybe any year in recent memory, because rosters have changed so much and players are back and players have moved around. And a lot of times they didn't see other teams playing during the year because of some of the schedules or teams not playing. And I think that's the case for the voters, many of whom are coaches. They're still not really quite sure what's going on either.
That's certainly a lot of it, Ed. I think that, it's very difficult to understand exactly what you have and what you're up against if you didn't see opponents last year. And a lot of these coaches didn't see some of these teams. At the same time, you've mentioned it a couple of times now, fifth-year seniors that came back, and not every school could do that. That it depended a lot whether you were public or private, and whether you had some scholarship money or you didn't. From what I understand, the 18 scholarships that every team has stays the same. If you want to bring back players, your school has to go and find that money. So you can end up giving 23, 24 scholarships if you have to. But if your school can't afford to do that, and a lot of them can't, and that's kind of the reality, especially coming out of COVID, where athletic programs did not have the best financial years over the last 36 to 48 months, you're looking at some difficulties in building those rosters. But if you can, do you have an advantage? Maybe, depending on who those players are, but age, whatever. It does make it very difficult to handicap this year. I mean, I sat there on Sunday night trying to put my ballot together, and I'm not going to say who it was, but I definitely had a team in the top 10 of my ballot that wasn't even in the top 6 of their own league ballots. So those things happen. It's hard to kind of figure out who will be who. Handicapping this year will be more challenging than ever before.
While we're talking about transfers, let's talk about the transfer portal. This season, more than 200 transfers to D1 rosters Last year, it was 106, so about double of last year, which isn't surprising. Some teams are rebuilding programs with a lot of transfers. One I can think of is Sacred Heart, which brought in a lot of players. Even elsewhere in Atlantic hockey, AIC has brought in some on a team that was already very good. But some other teams may be getting the opportunities we were talking about before to get a little older. I understand that's kind of the case with Boston College. So, Jim, what do you think the impact of transfers is going to be? Is it going to be so widespread and random that we won't be able to tell, or are we going to see some trends out of this?
Well, I think you will see a long-term trend. And a lot of that has nothing to do with just this past season. Obviously, there were fifth-year seniors that absolutely packed the transfer portal. And there will be, by my estimation, more than 100 players left in the portal after the start date of the season. And that's probably not surprising because there were a lot of what would have been fifth-year seniors probably being left. But there will be some players that transfer it out and don't know what to do. They might end up on Division III rosters. They might end up in different places. Hard to speculate. But the NCAA rule on transfers that changed, mid last season had a lot to do with it. If you could notify your school that you were transferring by a certain date, then you could transfer one time with no penalty, no sit-out year, and nothing as we used to have. You used to have to find a redshirt year or whatever you wanted to call it, a 1 year sit-out because you transferred from Division I to Division I school. So that is gone. And I think when you do that, that opens the floodgates. And we saw some really good players in that transfer portal. And that's, a reality that comes. You maybe you're not that happy with your head coach. You're not happy with your playing time. Maybe you just want to change the scenery. Maybe you want to get closer to home. Whatever it might be, player to player, school to school, there is some sort of a reality to the fact that if you give the player the option, they're going to take advantage. And I think that's exactly what happened in many of these cases. So I don't know how much that will happen going forward. And I don't know that we're ever going to see 300 plus players in a transfer portal as we did this year. That was a little high. But I don't expect the automatic 1 year no sit-out transfer to go away. That's going to be here for a long time. I think that's a big bonus. It was only something that happened, I believe, in 5 different NCAA sports. Football, basketball, hockey were all part of that. And they got relieved of that. And I think that's now something that you're going to see kids take advantage of as long as they can.
One team that saw a lot of transfers because the program was canceled and now possibly might come back if they're able to get all the fundraising in is Robert Morris University. Some of their players landed at some pretty good places, and about 20 players from there, I think, are involved in transfers both to Division I and Division III schools. But that brings up the whole situation with Robert Morris, and we're going to segue into that conversation about finding league homes for teams. But the Robert Morris announcement about cutting the program, the way the program cut was handled, and the public relations afterwards, you could put all that together and write a book on how not to do something, how not to end a program, how not to be fair to your players, how not to communicate well, and how not to have good public relations afterwards. There's no part of this that was handled remotely well.
There's not. And I don't want to get on a bashing campaign here because that's, the reality of some of the financial decisions that are going to have to be made, not just at Robert Morris, at many different campuses across college hockey. When you really look at what COVID has done to campuses, it's destroyed some campuses, in terms of what they brought in, what they didn't bring in, and where do you cut? Do you cut at academics? Do you cut at arts? Do you cut at athletics? Where's the right place to cut? And I'm not a chancellor. I'm not a president. I am not an athletic director, and I don't ever want to be any of those things. So I don't want to try to make those decisions sound very easy for those people. It wasn't handled well at Robert Morris. The timing, the way that it seemed to be handled, you had people resign from your board of trustees, which is never a good sign. You had a president, an athletic director that seemed very, I'm looking for the right word, but egotistical is a bad word because I don't think that that's appropriate, but they just wanted to go with their decision and make it stick and didn't want to listen to much. Now, here we are, a few months later, the damage has been done. They've killed these programs, both men's and women's, for this year. They've retained, luckily, a great coach in Derek Schooley, who will, hopefully continue to lead the men's program. They're going to have to go out and find a women's coach, and they're going to have to replace a lot of people, not just staff, but tons, as you mentioned, tons of players. I mean, if Robert Morris had played this year and they kind of were in the position of reinstating things in late August, they would have, Derek Schooley would have been forced with going to the transfer portal, as we just mentioned, and finding every kid that was in there just to fill a roster. It was unfair. It wasn't right. But the thing that bothers me, Ed, I think the most, and we've seen this now at Alabama Huntsville, we've seen it up in Alaska, we've seen it at programs that are threatened with getting eliminated, a lot of times told by the athletic directors, maybe presidents, that they're going to be eliminated. Then all of a sudden you raise some money and the school says, oh, we can bring you back. It makes me feel like college hockey is a bake sale, or college athletics at times is a bake sale. Like, hey, we're not doing really well, so go out and raise some money and we'll bring you back. That's not the way that we're supposed to be operating in a Division I athletic department. Like, what is the athletic director? What's the responsibility of the athletic director at that point? Like, there's got to be something where you're saying, boy, I couldn't do it myself, so let's go have a bake sale. Let's go, let's take a hat and we'll pass it around and we'll figure out where we can get money. But like, you're an athletic director, you're supposed to guide a department, certainly. But really, when you look at an athletic director's job, it's to raise money. Find money that's going to come into your program. And whether it's Robert Morris, or whether it was Huntsville a few years ago, or whether it's what's going on up in Alaska, and I know that one's a little bit more sensitive because I know that a lot of their funding is coming from the government, and they're in really dire straits, financially. But seriously, like, is this how we have to operate? Like, you have to threaten? No, you actually have to announce that the program's gone. Really disturb the lives of 35 plus student athletes, coaches, their families, staffs that go along with these teams, only to say, yeah, well, if somebody can come up with a huge donation, somebody can raise me $1 million, we'll bring it back. Yeah, we're fine if you do that. Like, it just feels disingenuous to me. And I guess that's where I probably get the most upset, but it's just my opinion. I'm just one person. And I understand that financial situations these days and ages are not easy for universities and colleges.
And being upfront and not disingenuous is important too. One of the things that was mentioned was attendance at hockey games at Robert Morris. And because the stands weren't full, maybe they couldn't keep it. But last weekend at Joe Walton Stadium at Robert Morris, there were a huge number of empty seats for the football team. Is somebody going to campaign to get rid of them? No, I don't think so. So anyway, I think we've covered that one pretty well. You can understand why Jim and I are very passionate about this. But when we talk about this, the other thing is there's nothing guaranteed that Robert Morris gets back into Atlantic hockey if they come back, from what I'm hearing now. If you talk to coaches around the league, they would welcome them back in a heartbeat. But there's some say there's thought that, well, if your program's not solid, do we want you in the league? I think that's been part of the problem with Alabama Huntsville and Atlantic hockey membership as well. But you could very well be in a situation where you're looking for league homes for Long Island, Robert Morris, Alabama Huntsville, Alaska Anchorage, Arizona State, Augustana, and Lindenwood. Those are all programs that would be looking for a home. That's 8 right there, 8 schools right there. Illinois, if they elevate and have a Division I hockey program, they'd have a welcome seat in the Big Ten. But you've got to find league homes for those schools. And when you talk about expanding college hockey, you've got to talk about where they're going to play.
Certainly. And every time there's an elimination of a program, every time there's an announcement, you see on social media, and I do believe it's very genuine from the coaches, even from some of the leagues, we feel horrible. It's crushing. There is a major problem mentally, in everybody's head of why is this happening? But then when you need to restructure, is everybody on board? Is it easy to put somebody into every league? Is there a reason that teams that were in leagues, Alabama, Huntsville, University of Alaska, Fairbanks, and Anchorage, that they are homeless, as we would say? I mean, these are teams that were just in leagues. Don't forget Robert Morris. You can throw that in there. I do believe that, Atlantic Hockey, when all is said and done, knows what they're supposed to be doing and putting that team right back in. But we have to, if we're going to say that we're fighting for every team in college hockey, then every league has to fight for those teams. And you can't just say, well, it doesn't fit. You've got to make things fit. And I know that doesn't sound right. And we're now talking about finances and finances being tight. So I'm relating to all that. But at the same time, leagues understand how things could work better, how they could make the nation better. It's now up to them over the next, and so this is going to happen over the next 5 years, Ed. And I think that the reality is this is not going to be the end. We're going to have probably 2 to 3 more teams, in my opinion, that will add college hockey in the next 5 years that are going to need homes. And how do we do that? How do we accomplish that? Is it a new league? Is there a need for a new league? There might be a need for yet another conference, but geographically, how do we make it all work?
And geographically is the big one. Other than Long Island University, which is close to Atlantic and ECAC and Hockey East in the footprint of those Eastern leagues, everybody else ends up being an outlier. One of those is Augustana, breaking ground on a new arena in South Dakota. Now, they seem like they would be a fit for the NCHC, both in school size and in geography, but you're asking a lot for a brand new program. Where do you start putting all these teams? And really, how significant is it to have a D1 program in South Dakota? You have to think that's really big in an area that junior hockey has been very popular.
Yeah, certainly. I think you nailed that right there. I think that should be an attractive target for the NCHC, but I don't actually know what the financial commitment that every school has to make that joins the NCHC. I don't think that it's short dollars. Let's put it that way, that there might be an upfront fee. I've never talked with Commissioner Josh Fenton specifically about that, but I don't think that it's easy to get into that league. There's some financials that go along with it. But if you're talking about a market, you're talking about a natural geographical rival for North Dakota, a market that we have seen the NCAA tournament go to in, I believe it's Sioux Falls, correct me if I'm wrong, South Dakota, and they've done monstrous attendance there in terms of turnout. I think that's one of the programs that when I looked at it, I said, boy, this one just makes sense. They'll turn out, they'll have great attendance. There's going to be passion up there. They like hockey, it seems, and it does feel like there will be almost a mirror to what we see up in Grand Forks in terms of turnout and in terms of popularity for the program. I don't like to say anything's a no-brainer for any conference, especially with the NCHC, because they are at 8 teams. You want to go to 9, you really need to be at 10. Some of those numbers, we always talk about the imbalance, odd numbers, but I like the thought of the fact that Augustana could go to the NCHC and do a lot of good for that league. Listen, they might be a bottom feeder for a long time. That league is without a bottom feeder too, don't forget. You've got some very good teams that have been at the bottom of that league, Miami and Colorado College, over the last few years. Those are teams with a lot of proud hockey tradition. Could you use a team to maybe sit down and take a few beatings before they become good? Because I think that if you build that program right, that could become an excellent program really quickly. So I think that there is a lot of positivity to why you would take an Augustana into the NCHC, but I say nothing is an easy grab these days.
And you mentioned Miami. Now, I think it's going to be the 3rd season now for Chris Bergeron. He's already putting the mark on his alma mater. And Chris Mayotte going to Colorado College. I'm already looking at some of the recruits he's bringing in. He's going to be moving that program up quickly. You've got Ed Robson Arena opening up at Colorado College on campus, a beautiful jewel box of an arena. But before we go to break and bring in our guests, I also want to talk about name, image, and likeness and its impact on college hockey. And we have not been able to find any sort of a comprehensive database that shows what everybody's doing. And there are a number of ways you can look at the impact of it on college hockey. For example, if you're a player at a place, and I'm not saying I know anything about this, but using this as the kind of schools as an example, say you're talking about Michigan or Ohio State, where football and basketball may be more prominent, it may be harder for a hockey player to get some kind of a deal. Meanwhile, if you're in a small market, say a North Dakota, a Minnesota Duluth, where you're nationally ranked team in a smaller market, is that more of an advantage for what happens in smaller schools? And is there going to be impact on this? And how's this going to impact recruiting? Are players going to go to a place where they see other players getting some good deals? All this still needs to be sorted out. And we don't have any numbers yet where we can kind of see where things could be affected. But what's your take on this, Jim?
Yeah, I've seen some trends in other sports. I haven't heard enough from college hockey to know that there was any trend. I'd be surprised if by the end of this year, we don't have a dozen players that have some sort of small deals with whether it's local businesses or maybe it's a national brand that just wants to tie them in, does somebody like Owen Power or somebody at Michigan that's one of the top draft picks have some sort of a deal that's in place before the end of the season? It's quite possible, that they're open to that. But, the other thing too, I've seen in some of the other sports is just players starting their own brands. Maybe it's apparel, maybe it's whatever, something that's sports specific, something that might not be sports specific, that you can actually sell. You're more open to doing that now than you were a year and a half ago before the NIL came in. And our other thing is, we haven't seen anything at this point, but will there be something of likeness usal on playing cards or any of those types of things that it could be a very small amount, but could that be something that pays just a kind of a nationwide deal to most athletes in the top 4, top 5 sports? I don't know that we'll see that. That I think when I saw NIL come out, now it's almost 3 years ago, that was where I thought we would see the most impact, but we haven't seen that as of yet. It's not to say that won't happen, trading cards or video games or something like that. But I do feel like that has some possibility for the college hockey athlete. The most important thing to me, Ed, and I think we've said this on this show before, is making sure that there is a good policing to keep it out of recruiting. That any school, Oshawa College, I don't care what, give me a bad name of a school. I can't even make one up sometimes. I think I wanted to say Saskatchewan Junior College earlier when we were talking about recording this, but could they at some point grab a used car dealership to say, hey, you're going to pay every one of these kids $25,000. We're going to give you the money, but that's going to make them come here. That's the danger that we've always talked about. And I think that those are the things that, as long as we keep those out of the game and there's good policing of that, I'm fine with what's going on. I think it's going to be great for student athletes. And I really do hope that college hockey players benefit. There's so much upside to it. And to see some of the sports outside of the major fours, I know there was a good story on, I think it was CBS Sunday Morning, on a female volleyball player that's making a lot of money early on this. Hey, get going, boys. I mean, you've got agents, you've got whatever you want to call them, representatives, family advisors, whatever you want to call them. You can use whatever you want now and just make some money. It's worth doing.
Well, Jim, something that has become pretty new in the last couple of years and probably spawned directly by COVID is the idea of doing something virtually. It's really commonplace now. I spent my time in seven different Zoom calls yesterday. And a great event is coming up next week, the Virtual Coaching Clinic presented by College Hockey Inc. and the Coaches Site. And when we come back, we'll be joined by Mike Snee from College Hockey Inc. and Aaron Wilbur from the Coaches Site to talk about that. That's when USCHO Spotlight continues.
This is the USCHO Spotlight, a weekly podcast from US College Hockey Online.
Welcome back to USCHO Spotlight. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly.
Joining us now, we're going to be looking at a very unique and new event for college hockey, the College Hockey Virtual Coaching Clinic, presented by College Hockey Inc. And great event that is coming up October 4th through 8th. And we're joined now by both Mike Snee, the Executive Director of College Hockey Inc., and Aaron Wilbur, who's from the Coaches Site, the organization that puts together a lot of these great coaching clinics. So guys, both of you is welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Ed.
Mike, I'm going to start with you before we jump right into the seminar and what a great event it's going to be. It's almost college hockey season. And after last season, I know that it's not going to be the exact same sense of normal that we had maybe 2 years ago and that everybody was used to, but it's going to feel like a more normal season this year. How exciting is it right now as we approach opening day?
Well, I keep my fingers crossed. I'm super excited. There's been some women's games already that I've watched online, and I can't wait for the first time that I go into a building and watch a college hockey game, which actually is going to be an historic college hockey game. It'll be the University of St. Thomas's first men's home game, which will be at the Xcel Energy Center in St. Paul this Sunday. So personally, just very excited. I know everybody involved in college hockey is equally as excited, and can't wait for it to actually happen.
How difficult has it been for College Hockey Inc. this last 18 plus months? I mean, you have typically traveled the U.S. and Canada preaching why is to go to college hockey, play college hockey, why, how to do it, how to execute things. And now you've been kind of locked into rooms and virtual seminars, and I'm sure you're zoomed out more than anybody in America. But what has it been like for the last 18, almost 2 years now?
Well, my tolerance level for Zoom has definitely grown over the past year and a half. But I'd say we're one of those organizations that COVID has made us better. Absolutely. We do a lot more virtually now than we did before. We're better at it. Also, people are more willing to do it. Tried to do a few things via Skype 4 or 5 years ago. It didn't go well. We probably didn't do a good job, but it didn't matter because not many people were on because that was just too high of a barrier for people to do it. But now to ask somebody to join a virtual conference is like asking them to make a phone call. It's just so accepted. So now the benefit of that to us is we've been in front of a lot more young aspiring players, and the people that influence them, their parents, their youth coaches, their advisors, in the past year than ever before. And we've gone a lot further. As I like to say, we've hosted an event for teams in Kindersley, Saskatchewan, Austin, Texas, and throughout Finland. And we'd never been to any of those places in person. And quite frankly, we probably, it'd take a while before we end up at some of those places just because of the getting there and how many people are there. But because of what's happened over the past year and a half and what's now kind of considered normal, we're able to do that. So once we get on the other side of COVID completely and hopefully life is back to normal in most ways, we'll continue to do that, and we'll continue to have a supplement our in-person events, which will never go away, with virtual events. So it has made us better.
Well, that's a perfect transition over to Aaron in the Coaches Site. That is, an organization that has been around for some time, trying to, find ways to promote improvements in coaching and, giving great seminars. And I looked through your site and some of the video content on there. If you haven't gone there, go to their site. It is fantastic video content. But to understand this, you must be in a similar position to Mike, where now the virtual world is probably more enabled than it's ever been. Nobody can give the excuse, I don't know how to Zoom, or I don't know how to use a computer. Everybody seems to have to know how to do it just to survive in life. So as you're doing this virtual college hockey seminar with College Hockey Inc., how has that transition been?
Well, surprisingly, it's gone really well, Jim. And I think one of the most overused words, in the past 18 months has been pivot. But we were in a position where we were accustomed to hosting a live in-person conference last season in September, we pivoted to hosting a virtual event with really no expectations on how it was going to be perceived, but it was fantastic. And for example, for this upcoming College Hockey Inc. Virtual Coaches Clinic, we're expecting nearly 5,000 coaches from most likely around 18 countries. So we just couldn't host something at that scale live. So, I think virtually, to Mike's point, I think people are just accustomed to doing that. They recognize the convenience factor. And from our perspective, our objective is just to get good information in the hands as many coaches as possible. So if that's virtually and that's the most efficient vehicle, then it's been a great fit.
Tell us a little bit about this coaches clinic. And I mean, just run down some of the names of coaches, because you have some, great current coaches, but some longtime veterans who are retired, but coming back to the game for an event like this and sharing their knowledge. What will people can still sign up for this event? What would they get out of it?
Sure. So, I mean, to your point about the people that are participating, we went into this, all the coaches who are participating, they're volunteering their time. So we owe them a huge debt of gratitude. And, we put out an application process, and just waited to see who came back. And then some really notable names like Greg Carville from UMass, Brad Berry from North Dakota, Kara Morey, the head coach of the Princeton's women's team, Todd Woodcroft, Greg Powers. And you mentioned some of the legends of the game like Red Berenson and Jack Parker. So it's been, we were a little bit overwhelmed. I don't think we would have perceived that we would have been able to put a lineup like this together in year one. But I think it really just speaks to, the conversations we've had with these coaches is that, you can just recognize the passion that they have for the game, but they're really in it. If you're coaching at the collegiate level, you're in it because you want to develop people as much as you want to develop hockey players. And I think they viewed this as a way for them to give back and ensure that the grassroots game is healthy and that coaches have good information to ensure that their athletes have a great experience.
Mike, College Hockey Inc. tied themselves into this event. What made this the right fit for CHI?
We've had a relationship with Aaron and with the coaches' sites probably for our entire existence. We were involved in a couple of their in-person events that they've had in Vancouver. And I think, Aaron, we just informally started discussing, like, what if we ever had one of these where the entire theme was college hockey, and there were some obvious hurdles that would prevent that or make that more challenging in person. And then we all adjusted during COVID and thought, now is the time. Let's do this virtually. And it, as Aaron just said, it came together really well. We canvassed all college coaches and a number of them put their hand up and said, I'd love to be involved and do something. And Aaron's put it together on the back end, and it's very impressive and really exciting. And so I can't say it was any one big moment other than just a realization that doing it virtually would allow us to do it.
5,000 coaches is pretty remarkable for the participation. Is this something that you're hoping to do on an annual basis?
Yeah, we hope so. I think that once coaches get the opportunity just to connect, and I mean, that's one thing we've learned is that through Zoom, you do get to get a feel for the presenter on the other side. And I think that once they recognize that these college coaches are such great leaders and have so much to offer, we certainly hope that we can keep this going and that other college coaches next year are going to be even more motivated to put their hand up and participate.
How important is this for coaches to be coached by other coaches? These are, especially college coaches, are so involved in education. How is this going to help develop coaching all the way up through different levels?
Well, I think the one thing that we do at the coach site, Ed, is we don't have an agenda in terms of saying, this is how you coach. We recognize that there's no one right way to coach, that, good coaches are the best thieves, that they're, in a constant state of borrowing or stealing the best ideas possible and weaving those into their own program or, kind of their own methods. And, so I think it is really important. And what we do know is that, particularly at the grassroots level, that, coaching hockey is challenging. Whether you're coaching a group of 10-year-olds on a recreational team, or whether you're coaching a group of 16-year-olds who are highly motivated to play Division I hockey later on in their careers. And so we just want to make sure that we arm those coaches with the best information possible, but also do it in a way that they can select what applies to them and ultimately put their own spin on it. But we, again, I think that we recognize that coaches likely have the single biggest influence on the experience that a young person enjoys through sport. And so we just want to make sure that we're giving them all the support we can.
What are some of the specific topics that you're going to cover during this?
Man, it's a real cross section. Brad Berry from the University of North Dakota, I know that he's preparing to show practice clips of how they weave individual skill development into their practices. So again, it's not just going to be him on a whiteboard with X's and O's. There's going to be video examples of what UND does in practice. Greg Powers from Arizona State University, he's going to be talking about how practice really sets your culture, and how some of the habits and drills that you implement in practice are going to inform how your team not only plays on the ice, but just operates as a whole. Kara Morey from Princeton, she's going to be talking about the culture that she's built there at Princeton, where, in very short order, they've gone from, or become one of the most competitive programs on the female side of the game. So there's something for everybody. We're really excited about it, and we think that regardless of what level you coach at, that there's going to be lots that you can take away and implement in your program right away.
Talking with Aaron Wilbur from the coaches site, Mike Snee from College Hockey Inc. The College Hockey Inc. virtual coaching clinic, October through 8. We'll give you more information at the end about how to sign up. Mike, as we're talking about, an event like this, obviously it helps grow the game, and college hockey is growing yet again. You mentioned St. Thomas; they're going to play. We've talked about or heard about Augustana and Lindenwood, and hopefully their men's programs being ready to go a year from now. What can you tell us about potential expansion? I know that's something that CHI always keeps an eye on.
Yeah, and some of those discussions that we have are confidential. So there is a lot of exciting stuff happening out there. And especially when you consider what the past 2 years have been like, and to still have that level of interest. And I did mention St. Thomas, and then on October 5th, next week, I believe that's Wednesday, will be the formal groundbreaking of a beautiful new on-campus building in Sioux Falls, South Dakota at Augustana University. And then they'll get their program started in 2 or 3 years and get that beautiful building built. And just another, one of the schools adding to the sport, going into a relatively newer hockey area. They've had, of course, tremendous junior hockey there in South Dakota, and some good youth hockey. But to be the first Division I NCAA program, they'll have men's hockey at this time, not yet women's hockey, but they'll have men's hockey. So it's occurring. It's kind of being brought back to life here after the COVID winter, I guess you could say. And there's a few other schools that we're talking to as well. So continue to pursue that.
I know there's a lot of interest out there, especially in Big Ten world, of Illinois, and they seemed so close before COVID hit to adding D1 hockey. Is that still kind of alive in a pipeline? I know there was, a comprehensive report put together for that, going back a few years now. Yeah. I wish COVID could have held off for another 6 weeks. Let's put it that way. The timing there, obviously, when it comes to college hockey in Champaign, was not good because of what was about to be announced in Champaign. But I don't want to speak too much on behalf of the university, but it still is the administration is still interested in hockey. They still see the same value to adding a sport at their university that they saw before COVID. But of course, COVID has added a lot of challenges to it, not just for the school, but for the other entities that were going to be involved in that. The city and the private real estate developer, the facility there was more than just a university facility. But there is hope and desire that all gets restarted now, and we can get it back to where we can be on the verge of announcing college hockey at the University of Illinois. Before I let you go, Mike, it came out on your Twitter. I know a few people in the college hockey world knew about it, but you announced it kind of formally that your deputy director, Nate Ewell, was going to move on and take a executive role at the Las Vegas Golden Knights. He has been pretty instrumental to College Hockey Inc. Can you just, maybe sum up a little bit of what he meant to this organization for more than a decade now?
Everything, literally everything. He was the longest tenured employee, he'd been here 10 years, over 10 years. If you pay attention to College Hockey Inc., you're paying attention to Nate Ewell. You might not know it, but you're paying attention to Nate Ewell, whether it's social media, our website, whatever it might be. Nate meant everything to this group. We're just a 3-person organization. So we all, I guess, we're a small organization that we like to, we like to have our the way that we're viewed be bigger than we really are, a small 3-person nonprofit. And that was because of Nate and how he was able to leverage so much and give a loud voice to our organization. But he got a very well-earned, well-deserved opportunity with Vegas. It's exciting to think what he's going to do there. And that seems like that'd be a really fun organization to work for. So we're shorthanded now. I would also say the amount of people that are interested in replacing Nate really speaks highly of Nate and what he created in that role. So it is exciting to see how many people want to become the next director of communications with College Hockey Inc.
Aaron, before we go, tell people how they can register for the College Hockey Inc. Virtual Coaches Clinic if they choose to do so.
You bet, Jim. So they can go to collegehockeyincclinic.com and access to the event is exclusive to members of the coaches site. There's discounted memberships on for $99 Canadian. And I will add that a membership doesn't just get you access to this event. It gets you access to our entire suite of content of over 200 hours of video, articles, webinars, etc., and events that we host throughout the year. So it's 365. And again, we like to think we help coaches check all the boxes.
I'll tell you, when we first started talking about this, you and I, Aaron, I was expecting you to tell me it was going to be $2,000. So the $99 Canadian, the ultimate value. And, I will add that USCHO is a proud media partner of this event. So best of luck with it. We look forward to producing some more content on our site that'll highlight some of the event as it goes on between October 4th and 8th. But Aaron, Wilbur, Mike, Snee, great having you on. Thanks so much for your time, and certainly best of luck with this event.
Thanks so much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Jim, this is fantastic for these coaches to be able to get together and for some high caliber coaches and retired coaches to pass along some knowledge. This is something that would be almost impossible to pull off in person. Imagine getting 5,000 people in one place to do something like that. And to see coaches coaching other coaches and really helping to grow the sport with the knowledge of how to coach and train and educate players is really remarkable.
Yeah, I think it's special too, Ed. When you really think about the people that are involved, obviously some high-end Division I coaches, both men and women. I look at, the fact that Jack Parker and Red Berenson are in the middle of this. Those are two guys that, 30 years ago when I'm growing up in the sport and, getting my first job, they were the most prominent figures. So I just think that there's something lasting about the ability to be taught. If you're a coach, to be taught by another great coach, there's something that has high impact and is very lasting about that. So I know I look forward to, being able to participate and listen to all these seminars. And I think that anybody that wants to spend the 99 Canadian dollars, what a price to be able to be part of this and obviously gain access to a lot of the other content. And I know it sounds commercial for us to kind of promote a product, but this is one that I really feel is going to be a very good experience for anybody involved.
And also for somebody who aspires to be a coach. I mean, I know personally as a former college player who's kind of wrapped up his minor league hockey career, and he's kept a notebook of drills that he's done along the way with different coaches trying to build his own library. So if you're somebody like that trying to get into coaching, maybe somebody coaching youth hockey, and you're looking for some insight, this is something that would be terrific. And you don't have to travel halfway around the world to do it.
Yeah, there's something, Ed. I remember about 25 years ago, I was working the American Hockey League in New Haven, Connecticut. And back then, Tim Taylor, the late great Tim Taylor was the head coach at Yale. And one of the things I most enjoyed was the fact that almost every day at practice, you would see Tim Taylor in the stands watching an American Hockey League team practice and making sure he took notes. And he, at that point, was probably, I don't know, a 30-plus year veteran as a head coach. And he knew what he was doing. He had some great success. But coaches, the best coaches, I do believe, continue to want to learn. And I think there's a big part of that that goes into stuff like this event from College Hockey Inc. that will be beneficial to any coach that wants to take part, because you're going to continue to learn. And it's one of the most important parts of getting better in this game.
Let's mention the URL once again, collegehockeyincclinic.com. For Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been the USCHO Spotlight, a production of US College Hockey Online. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.